Hey everybody, it's Suzanne Grandchamp, divorce attorney, author, and coach. Today you can see I've got my corduroy on. I don't have any court appearances, and so I thought it would be a good time to record a short video about a question that I get all the time from my clients, which is this. How long is this going to take, and how much is this going to cost? Just a reminder before we get started that this is general legal information and not legal advice. Legal advice can only be given to you by an attorney licensed to practice law in the state in which you live. And you'd want that legal advice to come from an attorney who also practiced in your jurisdiction. That is, in the area of the state in which you live, often the county. All right, so let's get to it. How long does a divorce take typically, and how much does it cost? These are two really hard questions to answer because each and every divorce is so different. But I'm going to give it a shot, starting with how long the divorce takes. Well, it's not uncommon, once my clients have made the decision to get divorced, to want to have that divorce done as quickly as possible. And boy, I understand that. I'll wrap it up and get it done and not spend a lot of money. So in order to answer the question about how long it's going to take, I'm going to split the answer up in thirds. So about a third of my clients end up having a divorce that takes 6 months or fewer. Another third have a divorce that takes between 6 and 12 months. And then the final third have a divorce that takes over 12 months. And so let's go through each one of these thirds. The first third of people usually don't have very complex issues like a business valuation or a custody dispute. And in fact, they may not even have children. And so they're able to look at their assets and their incomes and come to an agreement pretty quickly on what to do, about their estate, who gets what, whether there's going to be any sort of spousal support, often called maintenance, that gets exchanged between either one of them. Sometimes they can do this directly. They can actually sit at the kitchen table, like right over there, and come to an agreement. Many people cannot, but they can get to an agreement either with the help of their attorneys or through a process like mediation. And those folks end up in the first third, their divorce taking less than 6 months. Just a note about it, even once you've inked a deal and agreed to it, it still sometimes takes the court a while to get you divorced. In the state in which I practice, which is Minnesota, once the agreement is filed with the court, it's actually pretty quick, but some states have a waiting period, some don't, so just be aware of that. All right, let's talk about the second third of people who end up in that 6 month to 12 month category. Why does it take them longer? Often it is because we either have a complex issue, such as we need to get a business valued, or we might have somebody who's making a claim for non-marital assets, which have to be backed out of the marital estate. Or we could have potentially a parenting time dispute. Those things happen pretty frequently. But in the folks who end up in the 6 to 12 month category, they're able to work through these issues pretty quickly, often through a process like mediation. Sometimes resolution can occur through direct negotiation between the attorneys, sometimes between the parties. But often that sticky issue, whatever it may be, maybe both people want the house, maybe one party thinks they're in need of spousal maintenance and the other party doesn't agree to that. But whatever the issue is that's contested, it's worked through pretty quickly. And there may be a little delay, there may be the need to exchange what's called discovery, which is some usually financial information. But information between the parties in order to get a better understanding of the issue. And there may need to be some sort of report that's generated. It could be from like an accountant who's doing a tracing, a non-marital tracing. Or it might even be like a preliminary overview as to a parenting time issue. But whatever it is, the issue, there's some workup or due diligence that needs to occur regarding that issue. And then there's some sort of process that needs to resolve that issue. So with those folks, who have that issue, but they get it resolved relatively quickly. They're in the 6 to 12 month category. All right, and finally, we're in the last third, which are the folks whose divorce takes over a year. And that's, first of all, I just have a lot of empathy for my clients who end up in long-term litigation, because it's expensive, both emotionally and financially. People who end up litigating over a year and have to kind of, just grit it out for that period of time, often have a series of contested issues. There may be some dispute about custody and parenting time. There could be a mental health issue. There might also be some complex issues like the valuation of a business, a non-marital tracing, the issue of spousal support, which is often referred to as maintenance. There's probably a cluster of issues that need to be resolved. And sometimes litigation is protracted simply because the parties, and often driven by one party, but not always, but the parties haven't really worked through the emotional issues that led to the divorce and are using the legal divorce or the legal process to go ahead and litigate those kind of historical issues. And of course, they don't show up in any pleading, and they don't show up on motion before the court. What I'm talking about are the internal drivers of the divorce. So if you have a spouse who was betrayed, oftentimes the spouse who was betrayed hasn't possibly worked through those issues and takes out his or her anger toward the other spouse through protracting the process, through delaying the process, not being ready, not sure about what he or she wants, not being agreeable. And so the fight continues, is what I'm trying to say, in the context of the legal divorce. That often occurs. But it's one of those two issues. Either we have a cluster of complex issues that need to be, it's like almost like, an onion, that we need to wrap the layers back with regard to it. We need to figure out values and do cash flow analyses and maybe trace non-marital assets and back them out. And at the same time, we're going through a custody evaluation and whatnot. So generally speaking, the more conflict, the greater the process, or the longer the process, the more protracted the process. Otherwise, we're dealing with emotional issues that are playing out in the context of the legal divorce. So finally, we've come to the second question about how much is this all going to cost? And the general answer is that the longer your process, the more your divorce is going to cost. Now, the numbers I'm going to give you are just my, ballpark guesses based on 25 years of practice. So I can give you kind of rough benchmarks about how much this is going to cost you. And what I'm talking about, when I'm throwing out these numbers, I'm talking about your fees, not your spouse's, not collective fees for the divorce. I'm talking about your attorney's fees. So one side of the equation. But perhaps not surprisingly, the amount of fees varies by the cohort. So in those first third of people whose divorce takes between 0 to 6 months, they spend usually per person $7,500 or less. And that's because they either work together to get the issues resolved, or they don't have complex issues, they may not have kids, and they get through whatever they have to get through pretty quickly, and they don't waste a lot of time withholding their consent to what the other party wants. They tend to be able to work together pretty well, even though they may be divorcing, and they get to a resolution pretty quickly. For those folks who are in the next cohort, so 6 months to 12 months, they're often spending between $7,500 and $15,000 per person. And that just reflects the additional time, effort, energy, and process that it needs to get through the issues they likely have. They might need a custody evaluation, or they might need a business valuation, or they might need several mediation sessions to come to an agreement. And those additional processes are going to be reflected in the amount of attorney's fees that are spent. And then the final group of folks who end up in that last cohort, whose divorce takes over 12 months, spend often $15,000 or more, and often much more on those cases. In those cases that take such a long time to resolve, usually, as I said before, we have several issues that need resolution. It could be a custody evaluation that's going on the same time as a business valuation, at the same time that an accountant is working on doing non-marital tracing. And so there could be a lot of conflicted or complex issues, and likely both. Or, as I mentioned before, we might have a party who really, or both parties, who are working out the emotional issues or their anger and frustration and all this historical stuff through the legal process, by not being amenable to settlement, by not working towards settlement, by not being open-minded and being willing to give and to receive. And very often those protracted divorces have some element of that. That is where the emotional issues are being worked out through the context of the legal process. So that's how long it takes to get divorced and how much it costs. So thanks for staying with me. Just remember to hit the like button if you got value out of this video, and subscribe by hitting the bell above. I put out new videos every week. Thanks, everybody.